Tonight, we will go deep into the realm of the unknown and question everything as we search for the truth. We will explore the possibility of countless phenomena within the ultraspectrum, and together we will learn that it is all connected. This podcast is brought to you by the Experiencer Support Association, and it is a live stream broadcast. If you have a question, send me a super chat or become a YouTube member. This podcast is brought to you by the Experiencer Support Association. Take a seat, relax, get ready, and welcome to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. Today is Thursday, October 12th, 2023, and I, Ryan Stacey, am your host today. I'm a licensed private investigator in Ontario, and I apply my skills to the UFO, paranormal, and consciousness phenomenon as the Director of Investigations for the Experiencer Support Association. Welcome to the channel, and thank you for joining us. For those who are already YouTube channel members or thinking of becoming one, remember that you get priority over the questions. You also get behind-the-scenes extended footage, bloopers, and access to members-only programs. All you have to do is click the big blue button that says join, and while you're there, hit that bell so you can be notified when all members of the Experiencer Support Association release their latest content. Okay, let's get the party started. Our guest for Season 5, Episode 11 is Nancy Orlen Weber. Nancy is a psychic detective and author who has worked as a consultant to law enforcement agencies for over 40 years. I like her already. It's awesome. She has written a book titled The Life of a Psychic Detective, which is an autobiography that details her experiences and techniques for finding missing persons and evidence related to crimes. Weber has received endorsements from detectives she worked with and has been featured in multiple television documentaries about her work, which continue to be shown worldwide. Her book also discusses her personal spiritual journey as a psychic and how it has influenced her work as a consultant to law enforcement. Nancy's second book, All Nature Speaks Conversations with Pets and Wildlife, is a book that celebrates the interconnectedness of all living beings and encourages readers to explore the idea of communicating with animals. Nancy shares her personal experiences of communicating with animals and how it has helped her connect with nature in a deeper way, suggesting that by trusting ourselves and overcoming fear and resistance, we can tap into the common language of nature and communicate with animals. This could be an empowering and enlightening experience for all animal lovers and anyone interested in exploring the natural world. You can find Nancy at her website, which is nancyorlenweber.com. It's in the banner below. And you can also find her on social media. So Nancy, put on your tinfoil hat. We're about to go down a rabbit hole. How you doing?
Fine, Ryan. I love Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. Wow.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right. So we're going to start with our icebreaker question. There's a little bit of a jingle. It's quite loud. I apologize. 1 second. Yeah, we're still working on the volume on that one. I apologize. So today's icebreaker question for both of us is brought to us by our support group, Experiencers Anonymous. And that question is, imagine you can instantly learn any language. Which would you choose and why?
Porque yo gusto en español, so that's out because I'm familiar with it.
Because you already know it, yes.
Yeah, that doesn't count. I don't know it perfectly, but I know enough. So I would go with probably Japanese. And I have a lot of friends in Asia, and I would love to have some of the dialects from all over there and be able to communicate that way. I call it, I'm glad Google has a translator.
Yeah. But does it translate properly?
I don't know.
Yeah. So on that coin, I was thinking I would go as far back as Sumerian times and learn how to read those tablets, because that's the start of all this stuff that we're dealing with today. and just to make sure that it was translated appropriately or properly.
Oh, can I change mine?
Sure.
Aramaic,
Yeah.
because the Greek translation, for instance, the New Testament,
Mhm.
is Greek translation. And I
Yep.
did a little study with Dr. Rocco Arico, who is the Aramaic scholar. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's not the oldest language, but it's a nice one.
It's close. It's closer. It's closer than the English version, anyways.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's hard not to go into the politics of the world today in real time. Okay, so um,
Oh, yeah.
my next question is, why are you the way that you are? And what I mean by that is, go back as far as you can to take me through this journey on how everything started and how you got here today. And then I'll make some notes, I'll write some questions down, or I'll just listen. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, all the way back is remembering before I was
Sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
born. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you there. Yeah.
So, before I was born, I clearly later on sang songs that my parents asked me, "How do you know those?" We never played them uh, since the 1930s, and I said, "I heard them." So I have no idea. I can recall my birth, which was, turns out it was written up in medical texts. And I didn't know that until I was in my 20s when I explained what I experienced at birth. And my mother said, "How do you know?" And told me what happened. So that piece, those two pieces, when I was little, and one other when I was 2, I had what I called, I didn't call him anything, but later on I called him the man, by my crib first and then by my little bed. And I would peek out. We had a 1-bedroom apartment. My parents slept in the living room. My mother was talking to a female friend. And at around age 2, I saw something in the woman's belly. And my imaginary friend, supposedly imaginary, called the man, said to me, "That's a baby." And I waddled out and I pointed to her belly and I said, "Baby." And my mother said, "Shut up and go to your room." And
Mm.
so it didn't bother me that she said that. I had no clue why. She said it, and no clue why it didn't bother me particularly, but I remembered it. And the woman said, "How does she know?" I just found out from my doctor. My husband doesn't even know. So those things were what I call my seeds that planted inside, saying, something's going on here. And not everybody thinks it's interesting, but I do.
Mhm.
I always thought it was very interesting. I thought, as a child, you're all into discovery. So I remember taking the hedges, I don't even know what they were, in our little Brooklyn home when we moved. I was 6, and looking at it and taking one leaf and stripping through it and seeing the veins. I thought, "Do you know what I'm doing? Am I hurting your whole plant? Am I doing anything wrong?" But I had nobody to. That meant that it was always fascinating. Ants I played with. I didn't have animals or pets. And I was curious and I knew things that apparently the people around me did not know. And you don't know that it's so different except by the response. And I just thought, well, we're all different, right? I like dancing, they didn't. Or I like something else. And at 6, I remember sitting on the porch, shy as can be, hated it when 2 little boys came up to say hello, new living there in Brooklyn. And a little boy passed by with glasses, and they laughed at him and called him Four Eyes. And my mouth opened up immediately. "How can you ever do that?" "What? How do you make fun of anybody? Everybody's got problems. You do. I just can't see yours, but you just showed me yours." And wondered, what was that all about that came through? So I've always wondered what came through and why, or how it's happening. How do I know those things? How do I feel those things? Curiosity. And I've always thought later on, I never labeled it. I didn't label it when I went into practice as a psychic after being a nurse for 11 years, being offered the top post in psychiatric research in New York State. I walked away, loved it, but I was also disabled from a violent attack. And so I went into my career as a psychic, not calling it anything. And I didn't think of it as a career. I just thought I needed to help myself. And by helping myself, and people saw what was going on in my life, they started bringing everybody to me. And within 6 months, I had a full-time career. And I still didn't know what that was. Didn't call it that. Others called it psychic. And I thought, well, this is just who I am. Don't you see things? Don't you know things? You know, when I was a young nurse, I was 19, fresh out of school, nursing school, and a doctor gives me an order for congestive heart failure for a new admission who is wheeled by. And I took a look at that, and I looked at the doctor and I said, what? He doesn't have congestive heart failure. Do an upper GI. I have no idea where that came from other than I saw he had gallbladder problems. And I thought, don't you see it? The doctor actually listened to this big mouth 19-year-old who didn't know what I was talking about, did an upper GI, and said, how did you know? I said, don't you see it? I thought people went into humanitarian things, medical things, because you can pick up what's going on. I didn't know there was another way to know. I understood laboratories within a diagnosis, but I always believed science is an art, not a absolute. Anything can happen. And along the way, odd things did happen. And when I was 21, 22, working in Maimonides Hospital in Brooklyn, in isolation nursery, I solved something. Two nurses were talking in cafeteria about a doctor who strangled a newborn who had a cord wrapped around and ended up killing it instead of opening up the cord, carefully. And they wouldn't tell me who it was. Right? And I asked them. They shut their mouths, and that was it. But I found out that it was a female, and there weren't many females. There was one delivering babies. And I got a newborn a few months later with the order by that doctor, with an order of digoxin. Digoxin, 25 milligrams. 25 milligrams would kill probably a few hundred people. If you divided it up even. I mean, crazy.
Yeah.
For a person, adult, 0.25 milligrams. For a baby, 0.025 milligrams. So I called the woman in. She was furious. I showed her the orders. I didn't tell her which one. She looked, scribbled her name, and stormed out. I called my supervisor because I was alone and said, get in here. I took the order sheet, didn't tell her why, just left with the order sheet, made a copy of it, stuck that copy in my bra. Came back and showed her the order, and she looked at me and said, what are you going to do? I said, I want you to call the chief of pediatrics in right now. And so she did. I showed him, and he said, I'll have a talk with her. That's not good enough. I said, I have a copy of it where you can't touch. And 24 hours from now, I go to newspapers. This was in the 1960s. He looked at me and, okay. Turns out she didn't have a medical license. So put those two things together. The pieces where I could discover some things, didn't know how, and also the investigative fury at injustice. I had been a crime victim early on in life, and I was livid at anyone who didn't hear because I wasn't heard. So that made me a little bit out of my shy shell.
Mm-hmm.
And just fast forward. I just, one of the things I always feel is there's no harm in experimenting and looking inside. There's no harm in looking outside as long as you understand nature and that nature can do a lot of things you can't control, or pretty much none can you control.
Mm-hmm.
So the one thing I could control is what I seek inside, and I can investigate. And for me, I always believe that unless I have proof, I could be kidding myself. So I wrote everything down all along, still do, all along. So that's pretty much it. Other than 1980, after working as a psychic since 75, full time, two different psychiatrists, two different states hired me to work with their clients every week. I was working all over the country, giving workshops and readings. My kids were little, and it was a wonderful experience. I learned a lot. I was in the thick of it with people like Dr. Andrea Boharic. Documentaries coming out on his work, Uri Geller, Peter Herko, Cinco Swan, all the oldies. I was in the middle of all of it and loved every second of it. It was fascinating. But still, I wanted proof of everything. Still do.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, proof is important. I've studied this. I'm fairly new to the psychogenic aspect of the phenomenon.
Oh.
But I mean, like I spent a few years into it, but I spent several years not in it because I couldn't comprehend it and understand it because I've been a private investigator for I think almost 15 years now. I've been doing it a long time, so it was always nuts and bolts. It was always things I could find, but I had this interest in the paranormal, so I can appreciate that struggle where you know that you are special in a way, or unique, or gifted, if we use that word. But at the same time, your logical brain is just like, these people aren't going to believe me unless I have something that to explain it to them because they need this. I don't need this. They need this.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I need it.
You need it. Okay. Well, we
Absolutely.
need it as well. Yes.
No. The first part was for me to prove to myself or not prove to myself what's going on. And the first things I did are in the book, The Life of a Psychic Detective. After the first exercise, I think, I walked around my home picking 10 things that didn't come from me purchasing, from others who I could contact.
Okay.
I sat down with them, closed my eyes, held them, and then wrote everything that came into my mind. Pictures, thoughts, words, it didn't matter what. Physical. If my shoulder hurt, one of them, all of a sudden I pictured somebody in an elbow cast, a cast for her elbow. And I called her. And I said, "Are you okay? By any sort of crazy thought, did you break your elbow?" She said, "How do you know?" Okay, so I wrote it all down.
Mm-hmm.
I kept writing down everything to prove to me, or not prove to me, what the heck is going on. Not about me, but about how it works.
Mm-hmm.
And I came to a conclusion very early on. 1980, I was invited to the UN for, somebody asked me to be on, it was called World Day. Jose Aguilas, who wrote Mandala, had sent money to create a World Day to gather people from around the world, children and all. And I was on the committee, and I was one of the people. And I said, is it possible for things like a CB, a ham radio, a computer to talk to each other worldwide? And they said, we don't know, but here's some guys who do.
Right.
And I made an appointment, went to them. They said, sure. I said, oh, you could do that. And they said, no, not yet, but we'll get to it. Right? So
Now you have future thought. Yeah.
So it was the same thing with the 10 things I got. What I realized is we're all wireless. We're wireless.
Yeah.
And so is everything. But
Mm.
I needed that proof. I didn't want to just think it, I
Mhm.
wanted to know it. And that became a strong belief system because once that's the belief system, I can drop any fear or concern about what I'm doing in some ways and know that the focus must be clear. That's it.
Right, hit a button there. I was intent, and I elbowed my space bar while I was leaning in to listen to you.
I've done some things
I
like
mean,
that.
yeah. Okay, so my where my brain's going right now is because like you like times have changed over the years, and I'm sure you can testify to that. And I'm even seeing in my lifetime that things are changing from when I was a kid. Things are drastically changing. So a lot of things have been suppressed. A lot of things have been misguided or disinformation or however you want to, whatever words you want to use to explain it. Do you feel now that the world is more open to the idea of psychics being real and the science that validates these claims that you've known all along? Does that make you, how does that make you feel in comparison to the struggle, I guess, in terms of, just being you back in different times? You know what I mean? Like, was it easy to be the way that you are back then?
Depends on what age. So,
Yeah.
teenage years and all that, I was a geek, I guess, and had very few friends. I was shy, except when I was furious at
Mhm.
what I called the BS. So, but I was so fascinated early on by all of it that I was in my own world. I didn't, it didn't matter to me what other people thought in certain ways.
Mhm.
When I hit my 20s and 30s, I loved experimenting with everything. In 30s, psychogenics, after my kids were born,
Mhm.
I got into psychogenics a lot and set it up because we worked, I ran an acute psych unit, and the psychiatrists in training came through that unit. And we became best friends, and we would set up times to do psychogenics and support each other in it and look at things. And I found everything was interesting, but I found it was a clue,
Mhm.
not the thing. It was a clue to what is possible inside us to do. And so later on, I stopped everything, particularly when police came knocking at my door. I was done with everything,
Mhm.
and for pretty much forever. But that's how I got into things like yoga, tai chi, karate, meditation, making it all up most of the time. The only thing I had enough money for was karate at the time, my choice. I loved taekwondo, loved it. Skipped belts, had so much fun. So all of it for me was more about each of us, and I've always felt strongly that each of us is such a unique human being. And then I use a reference point going back. I look at the world and I look at what's going on. And I look at, as you say, we're in a very different way now, more accepting, etc. But I can also look thousands of years back and say, well, even in the recorded times, the Eastern cultures have always thought reincarnation was interesting. They always felt open about what past lives you had. They
Mhm.
were open about experimenting. Western, not so much, right?
Yeah.
So I decided to explore no matter what and see what I see and then find out if others do that. Didn't know.
Mhm.
And when I did, I found there were a lot of egos. Pardon me, anybody else, because I know a lot of people in the field who are great.
Mhm.
I found lots of people ego, and when I started referring out because I had so much work, they would say, "Why are you referring to me?" And I think, why not? How many people are on the planet? You got plenty of people to work with. So, do I think it's any different? Probably, but if I go back 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 years, probably not.
Mm-hmm.
Probably this is like the clothing industry that we know goes through rotations every 20 years, 40 years or so. Things come back. I think this is a repeat episode.
Well, geez, how is that possible? See, my mind always goes like everything is possible if the right circumstances are in place.
Mm.
I always want to know the why, not so much the when or the how. Well, how I'm curious about the how, but um, if we go back to the part where you were seeing, so this part of your life when you were seeing things that others couldn't,
Mm-hmm.
and if we are all wireless beings, which I believe we are as well, and I, I believe that we all possess the ability to be psychic at some way. My thoughts are, I'm curious to know whether or not you know why those people weren't able to see it at that time. Is it if, in fact, they have the ability, just like as we're learning now that we all have this ability?
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think is getting in the way?
Okay, the word psychic gets in the way in Western culture for sure. But psychic, the root of it is a Greek word, and I forget how you spell it, something like Psykiko, and it's pronounced shikaiko, and it means soul.
Mm-hmm.
And then English language took it to mean something part of, let's say, part of the soul. But it isn't, it's the soul. So,
Okay.
like everything else, there are babies born with less eye vision than others,
Mm.
or none, and etc. So I think the senses that are the soul's senses that come through to the form, clairaudient, clairvoyant, clairsentient, kinetic, telekinesis, all the different ways we can perform our soul's experience on earth. Uh, Everyone's got different abilities. Everyone's got different strengths. I'm not an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Even when I could run and dance forever, I'm still not an athlete. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have long distance endurance. I have short sprint variant. So to me, that's no different.
Mm-hmm.
Some people can remember, um, can see things easily the first time they do it, and others can take classes and nothing happens. And then one day they let go. So for me, part of it is what your inherent strengths are in soul coming through form. And then the other part is how much practice do you put in? How much time? How strong is your commitment? My favorite quote is about that Da Vinci in a letter where he was asked, I think by his brother, how could you possibly know and do so many different fields so well? And he said, point the light in a direction.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's pretty simple to say, what direction do you point your light in? And do you actually point it or just let it kind of mull around and wander around? And so it's an investigator. I worked with detectives 40 years, and some of them I worked with 40 years ago are still my best friends today. And we talk about anything and everything, but I've watched how they worked. And they and I were so similar, it's why we're good friends. We're both totally focused on something.
Mm-hmm.
Feel what's wrong here. It's like, what's wrong with this picture, right? You may not know at first what's wrong, but you
No.
can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that leads to the investigation and the answers to anything. I don't care what it is, a new theory in science, whatever. That gut hunch is a literal gut to brain response. But the soul has to be the strength, the
Yeah.
whole of self.
Hmm. And then actually being correct once you follow your hunch or your gut feeling, that kind of is, a validation in sense. And that word coincidence gets thrown in there from the skeptics, right?
Sure, but that's why you get proof after proof after proof.
Mm-hmm,
And still you will have skeptics.
mm-hmm,
And so what? My comment is they're not really skeptical at that point. Those are your closed minded, fearful of the unknown, not wanting to look inside.
mm-hmm,
Because I think psychology really gives answers to all that.
mm-hmm.
People who are so frightened of psychics,
It's
uh,
avoidance.
it's avoidance within them, and it's also not knowing that, pardon, but the word ethics comes in for even, especially for psychics, because people put too much power in them. And like anything, they make it the authority on what's about them, and you can't. You have to be able to sift through it and decide what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate,
Mm-hmm,
and what works for you and resonates. And even if it does later on, it's not for now.
mm-hmm,
So closed-minded is not skeptic. I am a skeptic. That's why I tested everything, check everything out. And I have certainly been wrong enough times to know I am not 100% accurate always. You have to check it out and know, can I, people say, I need the name of the murderer right now. I go, good luck.
I'm skeptic too, but I also believe. So maybe I'll settle for a skeptical believer.
Yes.
There's that. Like I don't believe everything that's in front of me because there's a lot I know with investigations. Like even with the simplest things, it's not what is being explained because we all have these fears, we all have these thoughts, we're all worried about other people, we're worried about consequences, we're worried about judgment. All these things get in the way. And when we get into this phenomenon, UFOs, paranormal, ghosts, psychics, all that stuff, like there used to be a lot of that judgment. Now it's just kind of all over the place.
Mm. Mm.
And it's almost like they're making fun of it now. It's kind of I don't
Yes.
know what's happened. I get this feeling that it's not being taken serious anymore. It exists, but we're all there's something wrong with us.
Yes and no. Some, I think it's partly because of language and how people present. I always thank the nursing background and the teachers who taught me,
Mm-hmm.
particularly because by the time I got into nursing, by 20, I was a head nurse, and by 21, I was a supervisor of nursing, no background, no extra education, nothing, offered top post in New York State. It was because I was a professional and I felt it and I acted it. It was more, I was a team member. I never thought of myself above or below.
Mm-hmm.
We were all in it together, and I simply had a depth of knowledge about something that somebody else didn't, and they had a depth of knowledge about something I didn't. And that's how I worked with the detectives, and that's how I speak. And so I find that the difference and the problem is the old language from maybe the 60s and 70s, woo woo.
Mm-hmm.
When we get into language that scares people, you're shutting down a large part of the country, the people all over the world. They don't want to hear it that way. And I don't blame them. I'm practical.
Mm-hmm.
Feet on the ground, wings wide open, investigate, experience, wonder about it. I have seen very strange things. I've seen a UFO. Don't ask me what it is. I don't know. People have asked me, do you believe in God? And I go, I don't know what created everything. Do you? Because I don't know how old all the universes are, and were they always something there, and out of nothing could something happen. I can go crazy thinking of all that, so I don't bother. I let it go. It's not mine to do. I'm not an expert. I'm not a scientist in that. I'm not an astrophysicist. I'm not a physicist. I know enough about it to be curious, but I don't expect to have all the answers. And I don't need all the answers. So for me, there are two components. How you present your curiosity about what exists and what doesn't, what might, right? And what proof, real proof, do you really have that's not Photoshop and all the AI and whatever else is going on that I love? All, I find it all fascinating, but that's not my proof. My proof is discovering that I can reach somebody I've never known, never met, or a dog who was lost, who I never knew, didn't meet. 2.5 years later, after I found him over the phone, told them where he was and when he would show up. 2.5 years later, they bring him into a talk with 200 people in the room. He looks at everybody, wanders around, and then runs to me, puts his head puts himself in my lap and puts his head on my shoulder and goes to sleep. That's my proof. I get goosebumps. That's my proof that he remembered me. I remembered him, but he remembered me. Well, he never met me in person, but he met me in a way that he recalled. That makes me curious. I've had that happen 3 times with 3 different animals. Finding them and then them jumping into my arms, and every owner goes, they never even say hello to anybody. They knew me. So that's my proof. And if I speak that way and can give the proof, just like investigating homicide, it has to be court, right? It has to be proven in court. That's the best tell that I can use and associate with people going through all kinds of things, all kinds of matters that might end up in court. And I say to them, imagine the judge doesn't know you and doesn't know anybody else involved at all. How do they believe what you're saying?
Yeah. How do they not consider you a suspect?
They should.
I've always found that with missing persons. I've always wondered, oh yeah, they're in the well in this location, and then they go there and they find it. And like, in your experience, do they turn around and say, good job, thank you? Or they turn around and say, we have some questions, you're under arrest, like what kind of reaction are you getting?
I just had that same question from 2 granddaughters who know what I've done in the past, but didn't know all this until they saw documentaries and read the book. And they said, were you ever arrested or anything? I said, yes, but nothing to do with being psychic.
Huh?
What? Yeah, the FBI. And I told them the experience, and it turned out in Las Vegas, I had $250 in quarters, dimes, and nickels. Doesn't really matter the whole story, but a murder had taken place months before that. And it was a vending machine, and a night watchman was killed, and it was $250 in nickels, dimes, and quarters. And so I was a suspect until I can prove to them I happened to have been in court in Queens that very day in New York, and this was Las Vegas. And we didn't have computers. So I was in the FBI office for 3 hours, and then they apologized, paid for my hotel room, paid tickets to see shows, and did anything possible that I wouldn't sue them. But that's the only time anyone ever questioned the veracity of my work, because I don't come out, I'm certain this is the answer. I wouldn't dare say that. But I've heard a lot of people be adamant they're right. And that's, to me, that's unprofessional.
Yeah. Abuse of power. I'm going to stop there, though. So we're going to pause right here, and we'll continue after a message from our professional partners. You're listening to if you're listening to the audio only replay, head over to youtube.com/Experience Your Support Association to see the video that goes with this audio. This includes the after chat, where I will share some test updates and talk about some current investigations that I'm working on. Yesterday, I published my 2021 Canadian UFO report. So I'm going to be talking about that, and I'm going to give you guys a sneak peek inside, and then we'll go from there. The 2022 report will be done by Christmas, and then I'll be back on regular schedule for the years, because the Canadian government was behind with COVID and everything else and getting me these documents. So I'm slowly getting caught up based on their timing, and we're going to talk about that. So remember, you're listening to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat, a podcast by the Experiencer Support Association, and we'll be right back. Have you ever wondered, or maybe just thought to yourself, if there were others just like you? You know, people with extraordinary abilities, psychogenic advancement, and perhaps unique intuitions. Maybe you just wondered if there were other people who experienced unimaginable, unexplained, or even unusual and paranormal events. Are there people who have more questions, more fears than answers? Well, you're not alone. You've never been alone. We believe you. Sign up for EA today.
Business. It's your property. Your assets are worth protecting. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services specializes in patrolling and inspecting residential or commercial property against fire, theft, vandalism, terrorism, and illegal activity. People and buildings are monitored to prevent crime. Keep your property, your people, and your assets safe from threat. Our elite staff are dual licensed private investigators and security guards. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services. Go to blacklightiss.com.
Welcome back. You are listening to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. Have you ever experienced an unexplained event involving paranormal, UFOs, extraterrestrial, dogmen, or any other paracryptid? Head over to experiencesupport.org and click the purple button on the top right corner and click Submit a Report. The more reports we get, the more we will understand these phenomenon and how it affects your people. Let the others who have already reported be that example that proves we are making a difference. And if it wasn't for these reports, we would not be able to do what we do. And for that, we thank you. You think I would have that memorized by now? No. Welcome back, Nancy. How you doing?
Good.
Good.
Very good.
Right.
I love being finding others who have skepticism.
Yeah.
I think it's very healthy.
Yeah. I do dabble though. Sometimes I get on these wild theories, and then I find these associating facts, and then I start to believe certain things. But the problem, I think, is the truth is ugly, and there's got to be more like us to, shine the light, to, not make it so uncomfortable. I think people, it's all people. It's all people. People doing things. People make choices. Now people have superpowers and they make bad choices. So on my last thought before we went to the break was, in your opinion and in your experience, have you encountered anyone who may have the same ability or similar abilities and they're using it for negative or selfish reasons?
Sure.
Harmful.
Sure.
What?
But I don't think so. Yes, I have. And there were, not to badmouth Scientology per se, because although I'm not comfortable with it, that doesn't mean somebody else doesn't find it fine. It started the first time that I was at a restaurant. I lived in Puerto Rico for 2 years, and in San Juan, and I'm sitting there at a restaurant, and two men are sitting near me and said, "We'd love for you to come to a meeting." And they were Scientologists, and they wanted me there, and they wanted to introduce me, etc. And it turns out they were following me for quite a while. And I said, "Stop. I am not interested in anything you have to say. I couldn't care less what you think. And if you don't stop, policía, no problem." And so they backed off. So every so often I would run into people who could sense things and feel out people, and some are great sales people.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they do that, there's a wide spectrum from people who like to consider themselves unique and special and have a gift and use it strictly in that version where you want people to come to you so you can practice clearing them and whatever else. That's user. That's using others. But I also see that in every category, in everything. So the tendency for people who are insecure and need somebody else to believe what they believe is at the core for me. And it goes into very personal stuff, family, where the family they grow up in either didn't accept them or they had their own personal take on the view of the family that made them so uncomfortable, and they set out to prove they're better than everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And they need lots of people to accept them and feel great. And they will do and cut corners, if you will, in ethics.
Mm-hmm.
They may start out with ethics. I can think of somebody well known in my country who started out very well, maybe not early in life, but he was well known to all of us. I lived in New York, and he was very helpful during times that were hard at 9/11. And then greed takes over, corruption, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I think people who are not comfortable with who they are start grabbing power through the vision of others, seeing them as powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And that can happen in anything. You know, medical. I was a nurse, and I watched most of the doctors I was so uncomfortable with. I even married one, by the way. So my first husband doesn't count. But I remember one guy who I loved. He was a fabulous human being. He invited me home to his family, his wife, his kids. He had a laboratory set up in his garage, converted it all so he could practice. He had a low volume so he could sit by the side and talk with people. I thought that's what you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Look around.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no different now than it was then.
Yeah.
And when I see somebody now, it's handpicked. So I think the psychic world lends itself to even more of that because some of it's totally unexplainable in common understanding. UFOs,
Mm-hmm.
you know, unless Betty Hill, you know who that was?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I knew her back in, I was in Hollywood, California with a group there I was doing workshops and readings for. And she was one of them. She was staying at the woman's home where I was working in.
Mm-hmm.
So she talked about it. Bud Hopkins, we, my husband and I drove him back from Massachusetts to his apartment. We sat and talked. These were all people I found fascinating, but don't ask me if I believe it all or not. That's an open door.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, yes, I believe things are possible, and maybe they are, maybe they're not. I don't have what it takes to be the expert.
Mm-hmm.
I've had my own dealings with UFOs. I've also done work in the Faraday cage with Dr. Puharik and saw things that we could verify. A fault in California for an earthquake. And years later, it occurred right there, where I said, when I said it would happen. Things like that. Okay, so that's my proof that, okay, you can do that. But do I know the other pieces that happened for me where I saw a spaceship in a dream, married to somebody else who saw exactly the same thing at the same time? I don't know. I don't
See,
have answers.
that is one part of this phenomenon that I'm always stuck on in terms of trying to acknowledge the realism of this, of these abilities. Because if we take this video, for instance, we're in real time right now. It's live. It's also being recorded. So once it's recorded, I can go back and watch something that has already happened if I want to.
Mhm.
I get that replay. So I'm in the future looking at something from the past. So if you're able to see the future, or anyone else is able to see the future or the past, does that suggest that we are in a simulation? There's some recording going on? Because that would be the only thing that makes sense. Because if it hasn't been written, it doesn't exist. It's at the end of the line, and everything else will just naturally happen, and we won't be able to see forward. And if you can see forward, then it must have happened again. And then you can throw deja vu in there, and then as the icing on the cake. So you know where I'm at, right? So what is all that about?
Let's take Stephen Hawkins.
Yeah.
And in Brief History of Time, where he says something about, and the bending of the light and the brain jams. You just can't go there so much.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe, and belief is just a belief, it can change. But I do believe time and space are recorded as energy never dies. And we know energy never dies. There's a theory called Caesar's last breath, where the molecules that pass through his lungs in the last breath, every being that ever lived after that and before that had the same molecules passing through at some point. Energy never dies. And we know if it did, we wouldn't be born with all kinds of pathogens in us that were passed down for thousands of years, mutating as they went. So there are some things about that. I've walked on Earth where I can tell you what happened before. I've been in a state in which, um, let's say, some some beings from the other side, perhaps, told me things that would happen later. One of them I had put down on paper as it occurred. I was in shock. It was during, I think, the 10-day war or something between Egypt and Israel. And I was told that a woman would come out of Israel and align with a man who was in Egypt, and they would make peace. And I went, really? And that was Golda Meir and Anwar Sadat. He had been a political prisoner, right, and came out of Egypt. When he came out of prison, he led it, and he and Goldie made a change. She was a teacher from New York, I think, who became the leader in Israel at that time. They made history. I went, oh my God, how, oh, I get it. Patterns. So the ancient Tibet, in the Book of the Dead, said, translated loosely, people who live in the past are extremely predictable. But that goes for nations and worlds. Patterns. People who live in the moment have free will. And I love that. And the free will says so much about how some people can mediate and negotiate, how Mother Teresa, there's a documentary, sitting there with two warring heads of countries or states or whatever. And she's sitting there quietly listening to them and saying, no, you will make peace for 3 days while I pick up the dead and the injured. And they said, absolutely no. And she said, oh, yes, you will. And she walked out and started picking them up. And because they knew that if they dared harmed her, they can forget about doing anything ever again in their lives. They would lose all power instantly. She was a world figure. But she lived in the moment and knew what she was doing and committed. And I saw that as I look back at things, that when I live in the moment, that's how I could confront the chief of pediatrics. I was 20, 21, 22, the most. And I was quiet. I was shy and I was enraged at the same time in my own life about things. Out of my mouth. And sneaky to do something I did to save a life. Well, really? In the moment. Nothing matters except doing either the right thing or the cheating thing. The power grabber. In the moment. And that's been happening forever. It's imprinted everywhere in the energy. Anywhere you walk. Karate teaches you. Walk into a room, stand by a wall, back turned towards the door. Be in a big gym. You'll know the moment somebody comes in, and you'll know whether you like them, don't like them, they're comfortable, not comfortable, they're to be careful of, not careful, right?
Right.
They train you for that. Thousands of years, right? But the future is also the same way. Alice Miller wrote in the drama The Gifted Child, people who've had very serious trauma as children or early in life, they grow antennas. They want to know the next moment. We're figuring out, calculating unconsciously or semi-consciously or subconsciously patterns that are falling out. There was a prediction made in 1977, I think it was, one night. A group of spirit, don't ask me, I assume they are. It's easier that way. And told me about a fires going to happen in the Mideast and who and what countries would be involved. Not who personally, but what countries would be involved. And I thought, this is a gift you're giving me? Thanks a lot. And I wrote it all down. And years later, I was telling my husband as I was reading back on it, and now we look at it and we're looking at each other, and he goes, I am so sorry. I said, so am I, because I know what's coming, even more if I'm right. And yet, we're always told, be in the moment, you can break patterns.
Mm.
If you know that the pattern is unfolding,
Yeah.
do you want it or don't you? And the easiest way I can say that is, ever have a symptom in your body of something that's not right?
Mm-hmm.
It's happened probably 10, 20, 30 years already. Slowly, you didn't feel it. Now you feel it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once you feel it, do you want to continue whatever you're doing that's creating it?
No.
Right. You're breaking the pattern. If you commit to change, then you're in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, that was where I was gonna kind of go. I want to come back to karate in a second, but like
Yep.
I have to follow this line here. But I was gonna mention fate, right? So wanted to know your perspective on fate, because if you were to tell someone the outcome of something, or any psychic were to tell them a manner of death, perhaps, if that's possible to know,
Yeah, it
um,
is possible.
you know, do we have the ability to make that change?
Do we?
Because if we're in a simulation and it's recorded, it's already happened. So
No. It
us
happened.
learning about it, like, how
See,
do you alter that?
the moment that it happens, it actually happens,
Right,
right?
right.
The first one that I recall clearly is a guy who made an appointment for 7:30 a.m. because he had work at 9, he said. Turns out he was a physician. He's sitting opposite me, and I see that I think he's got cancer metastasized and dying, probably not long to live. And so I'm waiting for the words to come that would be smart and kind and appropriate, ethics. And so I looked at him and I said, "You're a medical doctor?" He goes, "Yes." I said, "Then you actually know something is going on in your body. Is that correct?" "Yes." So I pose it as a question rather than a statement. I find that's very important. And I don't leap into what I know. And I go, "Well, you're coming to me instead of going to somebody to verify what you're thinking or dismiss it?" He said, "Well," I said, "because you're nervous and scared of what you think?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Look, do yourself a favor. Go. Go to a physician, find out. Know the truth."
Yeah.
I never told him what I saw. And he calls back about 3 days later. All tests came back. He had about 3 months to live. And he thanked me for giving him the push he needed. He didn't need me to predict. He needed me to help him help himself so that he can put his life in order. He had months to get his clients new
It's
people.
time. Yeah.
Right, right. And so whenever it has happened, I look for how to say, what to say, but never to tell them they're going to die. That's not my place, even if I know it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know it until it's actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
I did that as a kid when one of my best friends was dying. He was 13, I was 13, and my mother sitting with me, she goes, "Alan had lots of colds this year." I said, "He didn't have colds. He's dying." But I learned not to do that. I was 13, and he died the next year. I didn't know how and what to do about it at that point. I was lost. But that's why I studied psychology on my own, read book after book, but found that the best psychology lies deep within, asking for help, asking for wisdom from, I call it the universal algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the answers, but when you put it all together throughout the universe or the population or whatever, maybe you come up with a better answer. But it doesn't matter if I know. I don't want to know mine. I don't want to know yours. I don't want to know anybody's. I did know, and I don't want to carry that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not mine. But if I see it, I'm going to find a way to kind of give the person a gentle push in a direction that can alter it.
Mm-hmm.
When I've been called in for 2, 3 people one was dying, I remember, and I went with the person who asked me, and I go into the unit with her, and I look at the person, I go, I'm going to ask you a question. I know you're in a coma, you don't want to hear me, but if you want to die, just die. But if you want to live, open up your eyes and start talking to me, because it looks like you're dying, and everyone's scared. Oh, okay, I want to live.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I did that everywhere and made a whole study, probably 2 people would be right out of 100, maybe. Who knows? So I don't make an assumption that that's what you do and write a book that this is what you do to wake people up in a coma. No,
Mm-hmm.
that person, it was the right match
Mm-hmm.
to change the formula, the pattern.
Mm-hmm.
She couldn't face certain things and she just wanted out. But then she realized out would be permanent. And so she went home days later and she was fine. It doesn't work unless that person wants to change.
Mm-hmm.
That animal wants the change.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. No, it's more human. The more I study this phenomenon, the more I learn how normal or human, close to human it is. Like it's not paranormal anymore. It's normal. It's just it's us, not external. You know, there was a time where we would believe that, like, okay, here's like poltergeist phenomenon. This is like in my research, you know, I've often, the way that I asked people, you know, how their day was prior to the poltergeist event, you know, and they, you know, cupboard doors opening, dishes fly, all these other things, and then automatically they're like, my house is haunted, help me. That's the complaint, that's the concern. And then when I get into the, you know, so how was your day? Well, what does that have to do with anything? Just explain to me the week. Let's do in psychology, we call that a BCA, behavioral chain analysis. So let's try to understand what's going to that. And then we come up to this scenario every time, almost every time, I would say 9 times out of 10, something stressful is going on in their life and they're in their head and they're thinking and they're doing all this other stuff. And then few seconds before that happened, they had this intent rage or this intent feeling of emotion, and then boom, everything happened. So then I'm like, now that I have their attention, it's just like, is it possible that you did it? Well, you know, what makes us, we are told that it is so far, it has to be from external, but we are God. We are the creation. We are the, you know, we spend very little time giving ourselves credit for being more powerful than we're led to believe, and that's going to get into a whole but
when I first started,
it's easier to be like to investigate yourself, because then you can test it. Okay, now I know it's me.
Exactly.
Let me try it again. Oh my God, it happened. It is me.
If they admit it.
If they admit it.
Jeffrey Mishlove, Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove wrote The Roots of Consciousness in 1970 something. I can't remember. And I bought it, read it, and went, oh, I love him. He's still working hard and still does all the work in the paranormal beautifully. He had one little piece that I went, I'll never forget that. 3 outlines of a human figure. One was the spiral to the right, one was the spiral to the left, and one was a bold spiral to the right. And the first one said normal human, the second one said involuntary psychic, and the third one said voluntary psychic.
Involuntary psychic. I like that.
Voluntary to voluntary. Bold, going normal. Right, bolder. So you're a normal human being until, right.
I believe that because I had some weird ass experience, which we don't have time to get into, but my nuts and bolts version of me became an involuntary psychic in a sense.
Yes.
And I have reservations on admitting it, and I have reservations on actually testing it, even though I know I could probably do this thing.
Sure.
But there's just some part of me that just does not want to fully commit to that.
How about trusting the rhythm of you? When
Yeah.
you free up and don't put pressure on, then you make a decision when the decision is right. No different from anything else. What I discovered with Poltergeist was our electric bill tripled when I started working. We had a refrigerator, a sewing machine, and that was it. Those were the, and lamps, lights. That was it. And it tripled. People came over, changed everything, nothing. 3 months into it, reading The Roots of Consciousness or whatever, just getting into a rhythm and acceptance, electric bill went right back down. Gone to Poltergeist,
Yeah.
seen exactly what you see. And sometimes I'll point and go, who's the alcoholic?
Yeah. Got you stressed right now? Yeah.
He is. Oh, she is, And
Yeah.
I go, okay, you either change your ways or continue having these horrible feelings, etc. And so people who are frightened of the other side, for instance, and what might come through,
Yeah.
I tell them, have you ever looked at humans on this earth? They're a bit frightening at times. And some are, some aren't. So if you have a belief that you're coming from being a full soul, and you really believe that love is a power, and you have a choice, a conscious choice
Yeah.
between being frightened or filled with love,
Mhm.
choose love. And then that's a natural shield. You're protected.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you're always safe in this planet or anywhere. Come on. It takes your commitment to care for your life and not be prejudiced about others' lives. So I learned a line long ago, judge the action, not the person. And I've used that ever since, and I went, thank you, thank you, thank you. It works. So I can judge crazy stuff like Poltergeist and say, yeah, not so much Poltergeist, right?
Yeah.
You can't prove it to me that it exists.
No.
And even if it did, it simply meant, oh, somebody's lost. I've been with Spirit who lost at a YWCA that closed down because they were terrified of all the doors open, and they were nice people and nobody was raged. I go in, one room, a dorm, and I said there was a young woman who killed herself after she was brutally raped. And they said, yes, she lived here and killed herself. I said, okay, she's lost right now. So I did what I could do, and then it cleared. Live in the moment and not be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
People get lost. I used to get lost in car. Thank God for GPSs. I would call up going to minister also do a wedding, and I'm calling my husband because he has a map in his head. I don't. And go, there's a detour. What the heck do I do here?
Yeah.
So patterns that we create, right,
Yeah.
are the teachers. But if you live in the moment, Ryan, then you will look into yours when you choose to, not when you think you should or shouldn't, but when you feel this is the right time. So trusting, when it all begins with self-trust. That's pretty much the third book I'm writing, is about how do we get to self-trust,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's really the restoration and the repair of any broken trust within ourselves. So your timing is perfectly yours, nobody else's. And if it's not perfectly right for you to go look into the psychic world inside you at this moment, then don't. It's not perfectly yours at that moment. Trust it.
I appreciate that. It's all about feeling. So you mentioned your book. We have a few minutes left before we end the show. So I have your website queued here. You want to just talk to the viewers that are watching and on the replay on what they can find on your site? And I see your books are up here, so we can look at those as well. And
Right. They're mostly in the U.S., but they are on Amazon. The signed copies come from my home. And I do a lot of mentoring one-to-one, and I do a lot of classes. And I certainly do readings, and I tell people crime cases, I pick and choose very few now. After 40 years, I'm backing away from a lot of that. And so you can see, let's see, right, that's All Nature Speaks. And everything is, for me, about showing people you can do it. Anybody can do this.
Mm-hmm.
There's nobody who can't. If you think you can't, you can't. If you think you can, but the but on both ends is be a skeptic, not only about who does what, yourself. Write everything down. Write it all. I believe in handwriting for that because that's the way of imprinting. And I think there's a lot of physical component that most people don't pay attention to. You mentioned Taekwondo also, or karate.
Karate, yeah. What style of karate did you train in?
Taekwondo.
Okay, so Taekwondo is Taekwondo.
Yeah.
Yeah, karate is karate.
Okinawa, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have friends
Okinawa.
who do Eagle Claw and
Yeah.
all kinds, but
Taekwondo is Korean, and karate, well, depending on what style. So I've trained in Goju, which is Okinawan.
Yeah.
And so it's traditional. It's rough. It's hard. It's ugly because it's like, life preservation martial arts. But reason why I want to kind of get into that is there is a style of practice, and I never really put this connection with consciousness together with my karate until recently, because we do some of the makushu, so meditation, closing our eyes and meditating. Mm-hmm. There is an exercise where we have to block with our eyes closed, and it seems frightening at first because you can't see anything. And when you have your eyes closed and you can visualize where your opponent is, you're kind of all over the place. But if you place one arm on the other arm and you close your eyes, you can see them. Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting. I don't know if you participated in that type of exercise. And as soon as we're connected, his energy or her energy flows, our energy flows to each other, and then all of a sudden we can block all the other movements because we keep contact.
Yep.
Which expands our aura, which expands our energy.
Yep. We started off with soft eye.
Yeah.
Right? And because I knew how to root, tongue to the roof of the mouth.
Yeah.
Right? And then I imagined myself to be a oak tree with roots deep in the earth. So if I stayed in place, I was the only female. I remembered the Chinese master in Chinatown who big guys would come and he would just with Tai Chi. So I imagined the energy. I also knew kinesiology and how to rip open a meridian. So I would do that with my thought on people coming near me. I played all, we did stick karate, all, sticks, etc. So I would do this, and I would first soft eye because that's how they put us in, mm-hmm. meditate, etc. And I absolutely loved it, mm-hmm. because it was so natural. It was, oddly enough, ballet also taught me some of that before. So it became, oh, sure. Somebody wanted to pick you up and throw you around in ballet. You were light as a feather. Right. You needed to spin in place. You were a spinning stone. So when it got to karate, it was very similar in that concept. I already had the mindset, mm-hmm. and loved it. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, it opened up a lot of doors. Mm-hmm. Almost broke my door with a roundhouse.
Gotta have control.
I had no control over that. I got my anger out that way.
Well, you can't have anger either, like, geez.
I know.
Yeah, there's a lot. I have anger too. Like, I mean, it's hard. Like, I mean, if you're doing some sparring, you get hit, and then it's like, okay, let's go. But then you gotta stay calm, and
Oh yeah.
it's challenging. It's fun. I do. I don't know. I think we do 5 or 6 hours every Sunday.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I do. I have private teachings, and then I teach a class, and then we teach a big class, and then it's a lot.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, fun fact for the peanut gallery doesn't learn another thing about me. But there we go. Thank you, Nancy, for bringing that out. Okay, so we have a few minutes left. I did share links to your books in the comments, a link to your website. So everybody, please, go visit that and explore. The last part is just basically final thoughts. Like, what do you want to leave to those who are listening now, who's going to be listening into the future because this has been recorded? Some of those time travelers.
Okay, so people who like going to psychics or going to mediums or anything, keep in mind that it's really important that it either resonates well or it doesn't, and that ethics matters on both ends. It's not a game. So people with good reputations can be wrong, can be imperfect, can have a rough day. They're human beings.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one end. The other end is if you take and commit yourself to any kind of looking within out of curiosity and suspend any of your worries about looking within, because some religions teach you never to go there in one form or another. I want you to do something for yourself. For those who are on that part of the spectrum where you're never allowed, go look at the actual history of your religion. Read, because I have. And it's very different in the original translation of many things, but it's also a lot of things have been exerted because of political reasons early on. So take a look at what's actual, not what they're telling you now, even though you may have good leaders in your belief systems, whatever they are, philosophies, religions. Go back to the original and how it got started and where it got changed and why. Because we need change here too. We always do. Things change. And so your mind is an instrument. We now know it's brain and nervous system and gut and liver. They all talk to each other, instant communication. So clean that up, stay healthy, and if you're not healthy, get healthy. And in today's world, it's pretty easy to discover ideas. There are a lot of people who are functional doctors, integrative, and of course, holistic. I have been holistic since 1960 something because I almost died at the hands of people. So I'm all organic in my life. And it has worked to save. The wheelchair I use is current. It's not permanent. I was paralyzed 3 times. I taught myself how to get up, walk, and move, and dance again and again. I was fine. And for most of my life, I've been fine. Heading into 80, I'm not perfectly fine, but I can still dance. I just can't walk well. Ha. It's weird. But that's going to change in a few months. So I'm telling you, always seek answers. Even when the doors close and they tell you there are none, yes, there are. And sometimes those answers are outside the box. And you have to be willing to go outside the box and think, is it harmful or helpful? When it comes to whether it's a physical reality or an emotional or a mental or a spiritual, is it helpful? Does it have ethics? Think of all the things that matter about that. And then make up your own mind. You are your best authority, even if you're wrong. Make sure you understand that being wrong doesn't make you wrong. It makes a mistake and an error in thought. And that's how you learn, and that's how we grow. The bumper sticker, question authority, I want it on my forehead for everybody. No one's your authority. You're your own.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure talking to you, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, Ryan. It's great meeting you. Thank you.
Yeah,
This is-
you're welcome. Reach out anytime. Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Take care. All right, everybody, it's time to go. Unless you're interested in hearing some of the latest updates from the Experience Support Association, or if you want to pick my brain a bit about some of the ongoing investigations, there's some comments here that I'm going to touch on as well. So stick around for the after chat. If you're listening to the audio only replay, your show ends here, and you will need to head over to youtube.com/the Experience Support Association if you want to listen to the after chat. And if you want to follow my work, you can find me on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for watching. Keep your eyes in the sky and heed the world.
That's it, everybody. That is a wrap. That is the end of it all. Thank you for joining me tonight. I look forward to seeing you back next week, where we'll continue to have this conversation deep down into the rabbit hole in which we call the ultra spectrum. Thanks for joining us. I said that already. Oh well, fuck it. Heed the world.
Hello, everybody, and good morning. It is, well, it's not morning anymore. It's 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Welcome to the After Chat. I want to say hello to, who do I see here? Lisa. Hello, Lisa. And Win Niece, I'm assuming, because you hyphenated your name. Or you parentheses, right? Brackets? Is that what they're called? Yeah, thank you. Win Niece. Lisa. Hello, Lisa. All right, so if you're in the comments, ask your questions, put your thoughts down so I know you're here. I'll acknowledge you. Right now, I just got Lisa. So Lisa says hello, and she says she has psychic abilities as well. Yes, we know. You are developing these abilities that through your experiences, which is great. And you also said that you love Taekwondo, and you got your 3rd black belt. Awesome. And that's a Sandan, so that's awesome. Congratulations. Well, maybe not in Taekwondo because that's Korean. You might have to correct me on that because I'm used to the Okinawan, so the Japanese. Oh no, actually, Japanese is not the same as Okinawa. They're separate. And pardon me, the Okinawan way. What did you say? I believe psychic abilities are passed down through my family. My mom has it, and my mom's mother had it too. Genetic memory, like a lot of things get passed down. So if it is something that it's very possible, it's very plausible, and it's very likely. I agree with that. My grandmother read playing cards, the original playing cards, not tarot cards, the playing cards. And she's very in tune and in depth. I have an aunt as well that's claims to be a psychic medium. There's a lot of corroborating evidence to explain why I'm able to see some of the things that I see, but I don't trust it because I see some pretty messed up things, and I don't want them to be true. Let's just say that, right? So I believe psychic ability to pass down. So Lisa also says, I hear what you're saying, but to assume it's done by people, sometimes it can be dangerous. There is entity spirits out there that can hurt you. Believe me, I know, unfortunately. I'm assuming you're speaking to when I was talking about poltergeist. That's my assumption there. So majority of those that I have investigated, it does lead to the possibility that their own emotions may have triggered these paranormal quote unquote events. Does that mean it's the sole factor? No, there's a lot of things we have to look into. But when I was speaking to that, I was talking as if it's an isolated event. Lisa, to speak to your experiences, you have multiple experiences of multiple different types of phenomenon that have them interconnected in a way. So trying to separate them and then trying to figure out, how they all come together is challenging on its own. But you're unique in that way because you've experienced visitations, you've experienced psychic abilities both ways, receiving and now you're developing your own. Maybe you can clarify what your psychic ability is, or which ones you're focusing on, because there's many types. And of course there's craft involved and there's things. You got what I call the paranormal hat trick. You got it all. And that makes it a little bit more complicated. Now, when we get into entities and spirits, well, if those are entities and spirits and they have the same ability, then we get into intention, right? So great power comes great responsibility. And in some instances, if what appears to be poltergeist activity, even though I suggest it could be you, it also could be, someone else in another place doing what's called a psychic attack or remote viewing or remote manipulation. So all those things have to be taken in consideration, but ultimately I am not able to come to a definitive conclusion as to what any of these experiences are. I just want to get close enough to have an understanding of what it is, so that way you can fine tune it and go from there. All right. When Niece says, very interesting show. Thanks for sharing. You're welcome. Thanks for joining us this evening. Or I'm used to doing this at night, this morning. And Lisa says, what I'm saying is dealing with the paranormal, be careful. Yeah. Well, dealing with anything out in the ether, in the ultra spectrum, you're calling and you're asking for information, but you don't know what you're getting. You don't know what door you're opening. It's just like opening the front door to your house and say, hey, anyone come in, anyone's welcome. That includes strangers. That includes, those who are take a life of crime, if you will. You invite them all into your door. You wouldn't invite them all into your house, right? So you have to have these precautions. So it's good to be careful with paranormal. All right. So what is new? Well, let's maybe I can get to the social medias here. Let me see here. The medias of social. Facebook.com/ If you guys do have any other questions or comments, throw them in. If not, great. What have I posted? Let's go back. So experience your day is the first thing we should probably talk about. I do have a call out for people who may be interested in participating in our third annual Experience Your Day, which is on December 9th. For those of you who are not familiar with Experience Your Day, you can visit our website and go to Experiencers, the Experiencers tab. So for those that are new, our website link is here, and our Experiencer Day under Experiencers is here. Sorry about that. So there's that. So December 9th. So I still have a few more call outs to make to see who's interested. I do have, I think, 2 people interested so far, myself and then plus myself. So there's 3. I'm aiming for 5 or 6 to make it a good day for everybody. So there's still time, and I'm hoping to have that solidified by the end of the month, so we can announce it on Halloween. Replay of that video. Let me see here. Yes, so my second annual report for 2021 has been published. It is available. If you go, there's a few ways to get to it. If you go to shop, you can purchase it. It's right here, as well as these cosmic color changing frisbees. Have we ever talked about these? So these cosmic color changing frisbees, you can choose your frisbee color because they change colors in sunlight, right? You can also choose an image. There's lots of things. So a quite popular one is this misty blue purple haze, and you can go with the flat earth symbol, and then you can choose black, white, or glow in the dark, and then it'll give you your price and whatnot from there. So those are also in the store. So you can purchase the book from the website directly, but you can also go to investigations, evidence, annual data sets. Okay, I'm going to share this link in the comments here, because I want to talk about what you're paying for and what you're not, in terms of purchasing it, right? If you need it, it's free. If you don't, but what do you need that's free, right? So here there are 2 links this time: the 2021 Canadian Current Event Survey breakdown and the yearly comparison. So this is 28 pages that come from this book, from this report, 99-page report. But then you can actually see the breakdown if you click on that. Okay, so here is the breakdown of 2021. Okay, throughout the provinces in Canada, the reported object height, the amount of objects seen, time of day, all that data set, months, all that stuff is here, okay? If you want to look at it, and it will help you with your research, okay? Then the yearly comparison, which I'm doing now, which is the entire study from 2019 to 2021, it's all here. So now you're going to start to get the more fine-tuned details of what's actually going on, and it's going to kind of narrow everything down. Okay, why am I releasing 2021 and 2023? Because of the pandemic, the Canadian government was behind on their declassified documents. Took them a while to get. I finally got them. Then I had to do the report, and then it's released. So now I have also 2022's completed, and we're just lagging a bit on 2023. So I'm going to try and do the 2023 report in March. And then there's a little teaser too of some of the research that you're going to see inside as well. Okay, so that's free. Now, as far as purchasing goes, if you go click on that link, and you also have it here in on Amazon, of course, you'll notice that it is part of a series, which I'll show you that now. There is a limited edition for Kindle right now, but it looks like it. There's some promotion that's here. So, or that might be on my account. Yeah, no, I'm not signed in. So that's cool. You could get it for free on Kindle if you want. And there is a paperback version. Okay. So what exactly is it that you're paying for? You are paying for something solid in your hands. That's material. You're also paying, and I can show you the inside of this is 2020 or 2020, pardon me. Besides the data sets, you're actually going to get my explanations on what I think these things are. So what you're paying for is essentially my opinion. If that doesn't matter to you and you want to do the research on your own, go back to the data sets that I posted in there, look at it, do your own research, do your own things, and then come to your own conclusions. Totally fine with that. And you're also supporting the Experience to Support Association by purchasing that. 100% of the proceeds of the Kindle edition goes to us, I believe. I think the more pages you read, the royalties we'll get on that. And then, of course, we get a percentage of the paperback. We don't get the full price because there's a cost to make and produce the book. So it's a small amount that gets back to that. And, of course, if you want to review it, that'll be good. But then you have 2 series. So, and I also, because I published 2 books, I was able to create an author's account, which is awesome. So that's there. You can click on that. You can find all my books, which I'm going to keep writing more on. So again, this is part of a 2-part series. Okay. So here's the thing. The Canadian Current Events Survey for 2020, that data set would be carried over in the investigations, the data part. So this yearly comparison. Let me see here. That will get carried over in this report here if you're interested in just the raw data without any opinion on it, okay? But the cases that existed are still there, all right? So I was able to, there was a few in this report that I wasn't able to identify. I'm pretty sure I've identified everything in this one here, which is kind of good. Hopefully, which is what we want. But anyway, so that's there. If you guys are curious, check it out. You can also get a sample of what the book looks like inside, I believe. So let me see here. Yeah, read a sample. So you click on that. And then here you go. Everything's here. Situation. Here's the data set from everything that I've collected. Obviously, you'll have to turn it sideways. I'm not quite sure why they put... Oh, okay. So that's just the end. That's the end of the sample. Well, then. But if you would like a copy, I can give you a copy for free under the pretext that you are going to promote it and you're going to endorse it and you're going to write about it or you're going to do a podcast about it. If by any other means of endorsing the work that I do, I will send you a free copy. So just send an email to admin@experienceyoursupport.org. And we'll go from there. So that's it for updates. Lisa, if you're still in the crowd or anybody else, if you got any questions for me, speak now or forever hold your peace. I don't have Chris today because he is working with the team today. We are doing an unload of a vessel, which is local here. So we are providing security on a federal port today, doing marine MARSEC, which is marine security. So he is assisting with that today, which is why he's not here. So in case you guys were wondering. But all right, so I'll leave it at that. Keep following my page for more cases and whatnot. And we'll see you when I see you. All right, everybody. Oops, press the wrong button. See, this is why I need Chris. I can't end smoothly. So anyways, all right, guys, we're going to, have a good night, and we'll see you. Thanks for watching. Keep your eyes in the sky, and heed the world. Peace.
If you want to really, really find out about Ryan, ask him about all his work and UFOs in Ontario.
Ryan is one of Canada's leading new UFO investigators. He conducts and oversees UFO investigations on a constant basis. She's compiled a tremendous amount of data regarding UFOs in Canada.
I have used his research extensively. He's much more than a one-dimensional character. He's an authority on UFOs and investigating them, Meg.
Wow!
Really goes over how UFO investigations are done and what are some of the mistakes that people make when they submit evidence. For starters, don't edit your videos or photos before you send them.
He would come out with an annual report on not only the number of sightings, but how many were unexplained, unknown, or just, nothing could be said. What caused it?
If you want to hear more follow-up conversation between Ryan and myself, you can go to richardolenmembers.com, where we have a candid conversation on ufology, the paranormal, and more. And remember, while we learn and grow and search for the truth, let's be good to each other.